We finished last time talking about the difference between the Kabala of the Arizal and the Kabala of the Ramak. And I want to say that what follows today is mostly from the Zechrenis, mostly from the Rebbe's memoirs, not from what I told you, the Hagdama to the Sefer Sheurim, which was most of the material that we talked about last week. And the Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe says that there were three giants of Kabbalah who were maimed as a Kabbalah al Bosses Nochi. They gave Kabbalah structure, hands and feet, certainty and continuity. In other words, these were people who were unbelievably great tzaddikim and also unbelievably great go'onim. And I mean not a go'on that can learn a blat gemara. I mean a go'on like the Arizal was a go'on, that he had to work very hard to be able to find words to explain things to his Talmidim, who once and for all validated the Zayar. In other words, we discussed the controversy about the Zayar. We talked about the three shittas about the Zayar. These three Mukubalim brought the Zayar into a space where there was nothing to talk about. I did mention to you last week that the Yankov Emden, who only lived in the times of the Baal Shem Tov and the Alter Rebbe, felt, and he writes about it, that certain parts of Zayar are not from Rashbi. He has issues with parts of the Zayar. He says that some of the Zayar was written later and some of it is garnished to his daf design and so forth. But they had one exception. By the time these three Gedalim of Kabbalah lived and taught and wrote their Sfarim, any kinds of questions about the validity of the Zayar was removed. Who were they? The first was Reb Meir ben Gabbai. I think he was from Yetzi, Portugal. Meir ben Gabbai was a very big Mukubal. He was a Sfardi, from Spain. And he wrote a sefer called Avodas Hakodesh. And I talked about the Avodas Hakodesh last time. It's not an easy sefer. The language is very funny. Chassidus quotes Avodas Hakodesh, but it's a Yisroael sefer. It's really elementary. In other words, if you really want to know what's at the heart of Kabbalah, in very logical ways, and on levels of Mekem Verstehen, you have to learn the sefer Avodas Hakodesh. The second sefer is called the Pardes Rimonim for the Ramak, Ramesh Kodaviru. He lived in Sfas. Obviously, his roots were also Sfadik. Cordoviru means Cordova, which is the city in Spain where the Rambam was born and lived for his childhood, his early formative years. So clearly, the Ramak liked that Meir ben Gabbai was also a Sfardi, and he also passed away very young. I don't think he lived till 40. Mir ducht that he was born in Reish Tzaddik Gimel. Arizal was born in Reish Tzaddik Zayin. He was born in Reish Tzaddik Gimel. Reish Tzaddik Gimel would be 1533. And Arizal was born in Reish Tzaddik Zayin, it's 1537. Sachakel, 4 years. And he passed away in around Shin Lamed Aleph, Shin Lamed Beis. So you could do the math. That means to say he lived around 38, 39 years. The Ramak Sefer Pardes Rimonim is more connected to Sfiris and to Elamis than the Avodas Hakodesh. In other words, Avodas Hakodesh Sefer still has a philosophy/Kabbalah structure. In other words, Avodas Hakodesh was not at all a philosopher. There are a few Gedolei Yisroel who are as mean to the Rambam as the Avodas Hakodesh. I mean, he picks on the Rambam every chance he gets because he was a strict Makubal. But he spends time with the Rambam because he wrote a sefer which has a structure which is very much like philosophy. The Ramak has a very straight Kabbalah. It talks about Sfiris, it talks about Elamis, but it's also a very Mesudidik sefer. It's a very organized sefer. It's you know where to find things, and things are relatively easy to understand. I mean, you can have a whole shtick lachsidus quoting from Avodas Hakodesh. You think it's a maimer because it's so higoyendik, it's so svaradik with bisholim and so forth. Like I mentioned to you last week, in the Ramak Sefer, what he does is every single one of his Sheurim, I forgot what he calls them, begins with quotes from Sefer Aboid and from Zayir. He always starts off with quotes and then he develops those quotes. That's Darkei Bakedesh. And of course the third was Reb Yitzchak Luria Ashkenazi, the Arizal, and he was Taka an Ashkenazi. And I told you his history last week briefly. He was born in Yerushalayim. He spent most of his life in Mitzrayim because his father passed away. And then he was told by Eliyahu Navi to move to Tzfas Hakodesh. When he arrived in Sfas, the Ramak was still there. He joined the Ramak's cheder. People could not appreciate the true greatness of the Arizal Pasha. They couldn't understand him. Yadua, the Rebbe very often told the story that the Arizal was maspid, the Ramak. When the Ramak passed away, the Arizal made a hesped. And he said, what that means, if a person has a situation which is in from Movis, you have to blame it on the Eitz Adas. And the Arizal explained that the Ramak had no shaykhs to any yaram of Aveira, and the only reason he passed away was Eitz, because of Eitz Adas. And the Rebbe used to always say this Teir on Heyav, on the Yotzat of the Arizal. And the Rebbe once mentioned that the Gemara says, Arba Meisu Be'et Yeshel Nachash, which means 4 died from the Eitz of the Nachash. So at least, the Gemara says in Bava Basra, so we know who they are, Beis Binyamin and Kilov and Yishai, people who passed away because of the Eitz of the Nachash HaKadmoni. They also are pure, but at least you mentioned the Nachash. By the Ramak, you didn't even mention the Nachash, you just mentioned the Eitz. Verstehst du? He's not even Nachash, the Rebbe must be given. The Rebbe geteicht. The Ramak passed away, the Arizal became the Makubal. The whole Tkufa of the Arizal, all the Torah of the Arizal, is 18 months. From the time that Ramak passed away till the time that the Arizal passed away is a year and a half. The Arizal passed away in Heyav, it says Yartzeit, Shin Lamed Gimel, which would be 1773 Anerech. And as I explained to you, he didn't write his Sfarim. The only sefer he wrote when he was still living in Egypt. It's a Pirush and Sifidis Niyusa in Zayat, because when he reached such a high madrege, he couldn't be mitzam to himself to be able to write. He told Rachav to write. He told his Chavedim not to write. Bottom line is the other Talmidim also wrote. Rabbi Yitzchak Saruk, Rabbi Yisroael Saruk, and others wrote. And in the Sefer, Eitz Chayim, you have Min HaChavedim. And this is all a repeat from last week's class. The Shmone Sheurim are strict Rachav, strict Chayim Vital, which is why the Rashashniks, that means Abshom Sharabi's followers, who are strict about the Shmone Sheurim would not learn any Sfarim except for the Shmone Sheurim, which is really the Madura Basra Kisvei Arizal. But by Chabad, as I mentioned to you last week, there's letters from the Rebbe to Greenglass, which were destined for the Zelig Margolis, where he writes, we have from the Baal Shem Tov a Meseira, which in Yonam of Kabala, we take from which one of the Talmidim of the Arizal. We're not strict. Rachav, Aket, we take some cases from the Emek HaMelech, which is against the Rachav, and so forth. Now, the part of the story which is dramatic, is that the Pardes and the Arizal were different in a fundamental way. And that is that the Pardes believed only in Kabbalah Yunis. The Pardes held that Kabbalah you're only allowed to use for Limud and for Avodah. And he was against Kabbalah Maasis. He was against the idea of using Kabbalah to perform miracles, to write kameas, to write charms, and to do inyonim of sheim in order to help people and to solve problems like a Eitz. Although the emes is that Ramak himself practiced to some degree Kabbalah Maasis, it's known that the Ramak was an unbelievably prolific writer. The Ramak's Sfarim are voluminous. Unbelievable how much he wrote. And the man lived less than 40 years. He wrote unbelievably quickly. So it says in Sfarim that he did it Bashboas Hakulmas, which is a Kabbalistic trick, which is a mystical technique of Kabbalah Maasis. But upon him, the Ramak had gehalten in Shita against Kabbalah Maasis. The Arizal was an unbelievable practitioner of Kabbalah Maasis. The Arizal did many, many things. He wrote kameas, and he used shemis, and he used malachim. He used all kinds of inyanim in order to affect people, to help people. Now the word Baal Shem, and by the way, we speak of 4 baalei Shem, but there are actually many more baalei Shem. The word Baal Shem means, if I understand it correctly, somebody who goes in the spirit of Kabbalah Maasis of the Arizal, and believes also in the use of kameas and shemis for these things. And of course, the story which we all know, the story of Rabbeinu Nebishitz, of Yaakov Emden. Rabbeinu Nebishitz was a great practitioner of Kabbalah Maasis. He used to write kameas. Rabbeinu Nebishitz accused him of being a member of the Kat, being a part of the cult of Shabtai Tzvi, you'd mentioned. And then they had to be mavader. The Avad Arbaratzos came along and they proved no, that he was not involved in the Kat of Shabtai Tzvi, and that he was in fact a real tzaddik and a real makubal. So the word Baal Shem means, in principle, a follower of the Shita of the Arizal or the Shita of Kabbalah Maasis. What is so interesting to me, and I'm fast forwarding for a minute and I'm going to go back, is as follows. There is no question about it that Yisroael Baal Shem Tov practiced Kabbalah Maasis. And you could see it in the letters. There's a letter from the Baal Shem Tov to his daughter Adel, where he writes to her that I need to have my book of medicines. The Baal Shem Tov got the Sefer Refuos. And he writes to his daughter, but Laman Hashem, don't look at it. I'm sending you a shliach. Give the shliach the sefer of the fuas and let him bring it to me. But in the name of God, don't look inside. I mean, the Baal Shem Tov practiced Kabbalah Maasis, no doubt about it. The Chabad Rabbeim, who are the followers of the Baal Shem Tov, were completely against Kabbalah Maasis. Somebody once asked the Frierdiker Rebbe if the Mittler Rebbe wrote Avodas Hakodesh. It's known that the Mittler Rebbe wrote superhumanly fast. He used to write on Boygen papier. Boygen papier is much bigger pieces of paper. It's like 4 times the size of this. And he would write 70 or 80 shudas, small little letters. Which, I mean, to write a page like that should take an hour. When the Mittler Rebbe finished the bottom of the Boygen, the top of the Boygen was still wet. That's how fast he wrote. In fact, he used to write so fast, he wouldn't even notice that the paper was finished and that he was writing on the table. That's the table that burned on the day that he passed away. So imagine how fast the Mittler Rebbe wrote. So someone was matziyah to the Mittler Rebbe, to the Frierdiker Rebbe, that the Mittler Rebbe did it by Avodas Hakodesh. And the Frierdiker Rebbe said, Chas v'shalom. What's Chas v'shalom? He's doing what the Ramak did. Megeidah Shittas Baal Shem Tov. No, if we're going Shittas Baal Shem Tov, halt noch von Kabbalah Maasis. Why would the Rebbe say Chas v'shalom? And the Rebbe answered that the Mittler Rebbe's hand was so bottled to his me'ach that it worked as fast as his me'ach. Not Chas v'shalom was playing for a nes, and even a trick, but rather that his hand was so bottled to his me'ach that the hand did as the me'ach commanded. And we know Kamava Kamasipun from the Rabbeim. One of the Rabbeim commented, I think it was from Frierdiker Rebbe, that the Rabbeim never used shemis. But all of the miracles that the Rabbeim performed was with Emunah Yiseidu, with Poshet extra Emunah. Like it's brought, Chassidus, the Rebbe brings in the Siches, the Teiras Baal Shem Tov, the Degel Machne Ephraim, the Sidlik of the Rebbe. He was Baal Shem Tov's grandson. He was the brother of Rabbi Mezhebush, but he was much older than him. He knew the Hilak of Baal Shem Tov. The Degel Machne Ephraim was the daughter of Rabbanus Adel. He has the Sefer, it's one of the sources of Teiras Baal Shem Tov. So Degel Machne Ephraim, Parshas Vayishlach, brings on the Pasuk, Ki v'makli avati asayad nazeh, Yankov Avinu says, I crossed the river with a stick, right? Everybody knows this. So the Degel Machne Ephraim said that Param Achas, Ovar Zikni, my grandfather Baal Shem Tov walked across a river on the top of the water. Be'emuna levad b'li shum sheim. That the Heilig of Baal Shem Tov walked across a body of water without any shemis or any mystical tricks, with emuna alone. Be'emuna levad b'li shum sheim. And they have a kochzach in there. Because in Chabad, for some reason, we did not continue the tradition of Kabbalah Maasis. In other words, Chachafilu, L'chayru, were followers of the Baal Shem Tov, but in reality, we're not doing what the Baal Shem Tov did. Baal Shem Tov practiced Kabbalah Maasis. Our Rabbeim were in principle against it, and they beferish did not write Kameis. They didn't do such a yonim. I'm not going to say they didn't do such a yonim at all, but it's not the sheet of Chabad. It depends which. There were those who are more inclined to Kabbalah, and frankly, I really am not that familiar. Now, the Havana Shebedava, the Pshat is, I think, that it wasn't the Pshat that the Rabbeim were against Kabbalah Maasis, but the Rabbeim hold that to practice Kabbalah Maasis, you have to be Gor Grace. To use Shemis, to use Malachim, to use Inyanim, which could Chas v'Shalom bring to touching, and the Ktsei of Achdus could bring Chas v'Shalom to the slightest measure of Hepach Achdus. Look, a Malach helped me, a sheim helped me. You have to be in the highest Madrega of Bittul, so that these kind of alamas vesteden don't set in. So the Rabbeim were fanatic about this idea of not using Kabbalah Maasis, because Kabbalah Maasis means you're asking Malachim to help you, you're going through, say, the Rishtalshalos, as opposed to L'da Zahatinik. So the Rabbeim didn't want to practice Kabbalah Maasis, as I verstehe. But of course, Kabbalah Maasis is such an important part of history, because Kabbalah Maasis has to do with Shabtai Tzvi. Shabtai Tzvi was a practitioner of Kabbalah Maasis, and that was his whole thing. And this is why Kabbalah Maasis is such a controversy, and this is why this part of the story is so significant and so important, because it brings into play an aspect of the controversy of Chassidus. When Chassidus emerged, and there was such a strong opposition, this is a significant part of it, the Inyan of Kabbalah Maasis. Now I want to tell you a story. In the year Reish Samach is the year 1500, a Jew who was around 50 years old shows up in the city of Krakow in Poland, Krakow. His name was Reb Yosef Yuzfa, as I state. Reb Yosef Yuzfa was a 50-year-old Polish. He had never been married. He spent his entire life Parash, removed from this world, all he did was learn and daven in the highest madrigas possible. He was from the Gerushe Sfarad. He was kicked out of Spain, 1492, maybe Portugal, but he was kicked out of Spain. He was kicked out of the Iberian Peninsula, or the Spain, or the Portugal, I forgot. And he came to Krakow, and he settled in Krakow. He moved into a shul, and he sat there and learned day and night. He slept on a bench. The Krakow Yidden, the Jews of Krakow, realized that they have amongst themselves a tzaddik. So they supported him. I mean, what exactly did he need? A piece of bread. They paid for his mikveh. He needed nothing. He sat and slept in shul, learned day and night, didn't talk to anybody, and nobody talked to him. Ish Kodesh. And whatever his needs were, the community provided. And 30 years passed like this. 30 years passed. Now Reb Yosef Yuzfa is around 80. It was a young couple that got married. The husband's name happened to be Yosef Petachanam, and I forget at the moment what. And they were married for a year or two. A young couple. How old will a young couple be? In their 20s. And the husband went on a business trip, and he was killed. Bandits found him, attacked him, and they killed him. They didn't have any children, so the wife needed to get chalitza. She got chalitza from one of the brothers. And now she was an almona. And then she starts having dreams. And the dreams that she's having are frightening her. She's thinking that she's supposed to be losing her mind. But the dreams keep happening again and again. Her father comes to her in a dream and tells her that she should marry Reb Yosef Yuzfa. Reb Yosef Yuzfa is an 80-year-old man, never been married. Parash in the ganze Welt. She's a girl in her 20s, Mistame, maybe even younger. And her father comes to her over and tells her, you should know it's very, very important that you should marry Reb Yosef Yuzfa. It's Negeya, Veistach. She has this dream again and again. And she thinks she's delusional, she's losing her mind, she's embarrassed. One day, Reb Yosef Yuzfa himself shows up in the Bezdin Shtibel of Krakow, and he tells the Bezdin of Krakow, I decided that I want to get married. A Yidat Tzaddik, an 80-year-old man, mitamol. Okay? And he says he wants to marry this young kid, this girl who could have been his granddaughter or his great-granddaughter. So the Bezdin call her. They call her, and they start to talk to her about a possible shidduch, and she starts crying. Fragt man bei ihr, was weinst du? They ask her, why are you crying? She says, I'm embarrassed to tell you. But eventually she told the story. So the Bezdin says, you should know that Reb Yosef Yuzfa was already here, and he asked about you. It was a siman that you're not delusional and you're not crazy, but it's taka that's not. So this old tzaddik marries this young almona, and after being married for 2 years, they had a son whom they named Eliyahu. After Eliyahu another. And Reb Yosef Yuzfa became like a new man. He was like you figure now 82, 83 years old, yeah? He devoted his entire life to this little boy. He taught this boy everything. No, we didn't send Taha Malamed because he was too busy learning Lomdas. His whole life became this child. He taught him Aleph Beis, and he taught him Siddur, and he taught him Chumash, and he taught him Halacha. And understandably, when you have a Malamed like this, and obviously this child was no ordinary child, he became a prodigy, became a Eli. In a very early age, he was Meshaksheg and Teira and Aveda and Yireh, unbelievably. When Eliyahu turns 12, Reb Yosef Yuzfa calls his wife. And he says to his wife, I want you to understand something. He says, this marriage between me and you was not a normal marriage. The marriage between me and you was because a special neshama had to come into this world. So he says to her, I am going to die soon. I'm going to die before his bar mitzvah. And I want you to feel free to get married again to a regular person and have a regular life and have regular children. And you shouldn't feel that out of loyalty to me, she was in her 30s, you shouldn't remarry. But I want you to understand that our son is no ordinary boy. Our son is a special neshama, a special tzaddik. And you're not allowed to interfere in his life. If he asks permission to leave Krakow, as hard as it's going to be for you, you're going to be an almana with one son, you have to let him leave. And kach have, a short while before this boy's bar mitzvah, this tzaddik Reb Yosef Yuzfa passes away. So when the Kroker Kehillah celebrated this Eliyahu's bar mitzvah, it was the whole city came to the bar mitzvah. B'tzadecha, there was such a tragic thing. Tzadasheni, this kid was a gvaldik ilui, and by his bar mitzvah he said Torah that was mafli all the go'onim of Kroker. Then you're talking 450 years ago, and the community was very proud of him. But exactly as his father predicted, mamish weeks after his bar mitzvah, he comes to his mother, he's itching, he says, I have to leave. She already knew this was going to happen, so she let him leave. And Reb Eliyahu disappears. And the Frierdiker Rebbe writes, this Eliyahu disappeared for 40 years. I don't know. We have no idea what became of him over the next 40 years. What we do know is that as a man in his early 50s, this Eliyahu showed up in the city of Worms, which is in Germany, and he became famous as Reb Eliyahu Baal Shem of Worms. This is Reb Eliyahu Baal Shem. Reb Eliyahu Baal Shem had Gvaldik Arichas Yomim. He lived 110 years. Reb Eliyahu Baal Shem of Maasis, Worms. What made him unique was he was the first European Makubal to go in the derech of the Arizal of Kabala Maasis. In other words, Kabala Maasis was in Asia Minor, was in Yisroael, where the Arizal was. The first Makubal to bring Kabala Maasis to Europe was this Reb Eliyahu Baal Shem, who had Moed the Karichas Yom. So from the time of Bar Mitzvah till the age of 50, we have no record of this person's life. And then the Frierdiker Rebbe speculates. He says, even though we don't know where this person was, but if you do the mathematics, says the Rebbe, it seems very, very reasonable that he spent some of that time in Tzfas, and that min hastam, he was from the Chavedim, he was from the Chevre, from the kibbutz of the Arizal. In other words, the previous Rebbe doesn't want to say it befedish, but he says it bederech mashmos. It seems to him that Reb Eliyahu Baal Shem was a makabel rishon from the Arizal. In other words, not he learned from Talmidei Hari or he read Kisvei Hari, but he was poshet and tzfas and learned Torah from the Arizal. The reason this is so important to the previous Rebbe in the memoirs is because it's very, very important in the previous Rebbe's Torah perspective to link the Baal Shem Tov to the Arizal. Because Chassidus sees themselves as the hemshech specifically of Kabbalah Sa'ari. There's a letter from the Baal Shem Tov which is printed in the Hatamim from the Geniza. Baal Shem Tov was writing in his own defense, where somebody was complaining against the sheet of the Baal Shem Tov. He says, what do you want from me? My Teda is the Teda sa Pardes. He brings the Pardes that kulak make lachashiv. Everything is achtus, you know. But the Chassidus is on one level a Teda which is a combination of Kabbalah sa Ramak and Kabbalah sa Arizal. But specifically, in other words, where there's differences in Kabbalah sa Arizal and Kabbalah sa Ramak, Chassidus is Kabbalah Sa'ari. So it's important for the Frierdiker Rebbe to find a link between Chassidus and the Arizal. This is how he finds the link. That he speculates, and he come over in V'gam Poshet, when the Frierdiker Rebbe says, B'derech Efsher, is be'unz mit avados, ki do the word, that Eliyahu Baal Shem spent time in Tzfas, and he learned Torah from the Arizal himself. Now when he brought Kabbalah Maasis to Europe, there was huge machlekes. There was a Yid, I forgot the name of the father, but the son's name was the B'Shamai Zundru. There was a father and a son, big Oinim, who were warriors against Kabbalah B'chlal. It says Kabbalah is nonsense, and it's kfira, and it's Avodah Zarah. Two great Oinim, a father and a son, I'm sorry, I forget the father's name, that they dedicated their life to spreading Kabbalah, but they were especially fixed on those Mekubalim who were engaged in Kabbalah Maasis. In other words, Reb Eliyahu Baal Shem had menagdim. It's a very long time ago, so we don't hear so much about it, but there was vitriolic opposition. There was very, very outspoken criticism of the Kabbalah Maasis in the derech of Reb Eliyahu Baal Shem. There's no question about it. And if you read the previous Rebbe's memoirs, you know a significant piece, many chapters, talk about a man by the name of Reb Baruch Visioner, Reb Baruch of Vision. Reb Baruch, the Alter Rebbe's father, here's stories about Reb Baruch Visioner. And the Baruch Visioner's life is very interesting, but the essence of Baruch Visioner's life was that he was a makabel from Eliyahu Baal Shem, and he brought Reb Eliyahu Baal Shem to Litte, to Slutsk, and to Pinsk, and to Minsk, and to places where they hated Kabbalah v'Mizrach. And he brought his Rebbe and he tricked them a bit. He came as an unknown tzaddik and he spoke divrei Torah and he made a great impression. They didn't know who he was fully till he left. To so to speak, break the ice by people who were so anti-Kabbalah. Reb Eliyahu Baal Shem, of course, had many Talmidim. He lived 110 years, had a big mishpacha, as they stated. When he passed away, the Mamal Makim was Reb Yisroael Baal Shem, who settled in Zamoch, which is a different city in Europe. And when Reb Yisroael Baal Shem passed away, he was succeeded by Reb Eliyahu Baal Shem. And Reb Eliyahu Baal Shem was in Rapshitz. Rapshitz is the very Eastern Europe. And Reb Eliyahu Baal Shem was succeeded by Reb Yisroael Baal Shem Tov. And what is interesting is, when you read the Geniza Chesonis, when you read the letters, two things are impressed upon you. Number one, that the same Achi Ashileni who learned Teda with the Baal Shem Tov also learned Teda with the other Baal Shem. In other words, it wasn't the Pshat that Baal Shem Tov was the first one to learn Chassidus. The Baal Shem Tov was the first one to reveal Chassidus. Upon him, that Reb Adam Baal Shem already learned Teda with Achi Ashileni, and perhaps Reb Yisroael Baal Shem and Reb Eliyahu Baal Shem also did. It's very important to understand that Chassidus is different than Kabbalah. Kabbalah was taught to the Arizal by Eliyahu and Navi. And Chassidus was taught to the Baal Shem Tov Achi Ashileni. Achi Ashileni was, the Rebbe was a generation closer to Moshe Rabbeinu. And I also mentioned to you once, there's a letter from the Rebbe to somebody that Eliyahu Hanavi taught Arizal 7 years. And the Achi Ashileni taught the Baal Shem Tov 10 years with all kinds of Ramazim Abisad. So it's upon him that the idea of Chassidus existed behester before. What made the Baal Shem Tov special was the Baal Shem Tov was given the task of being Magala Chassid. And the second thing which becomes quite apparent from the Geniza was that when the Baal Shem Tov revealed himself, Rabbi Adam Baal Shem was still alive. Rabbi Adam Baal Shem was the Baal Shem Tov's Rebbe. I think in some places he calls him Meiri Rabbi. And the Adam Baal Shem was the Tzaddik Nister. And he was at the helm of a movement of Tzaddik in the Sarim. Rabbi Yisroael Baal Shem Tov was Nisgala outside Rebbe and Eitz and the Flois to reveal Chassidus. You know, how do we call Chassidus? A derech and Torah based on the principle of Avos Yisrael, which is going to prepare Seil as a derech for Melech HaMashiach. Rabbi Adam Baal Shem was still alive. And this is part of the story that the Baal Shem Tov had to, so to speak, step ahead of his Rebbe, as verstehe, based on the Geniz, on the letters, because this was the Ratzon Elyon. The Rebbe still wanted that Yisroael Baal Shem Tov should become a Rebbe. So this is the story. The purpose of having this conversation, in other words, the purpose of last week's discussion, this week's discussion, is to show two points. That mitzad echad, Chassidus is a hemshech to before. In other words, the Torah Chassidus, the oimek, the pnimius, the nekuda, the essence of Chassidus goes back to Reb Adam Baal Shem, to Reb Yisroael Baal Shem, to Reb Eliyahu Baal Shem, and to the Arizal, the Kabala. But at the same time, Chassidus is a brand new Torah. They came directly from Atmos and Hus, and the Nashama of the Heilig Baal Shem Tov was brought down into this world in order to be Magal this Torah. And the essence of this Torah has two Yesodis. If you wanted to identify Chassidus, you can identify Chassidus in two Nekudas. What are these two Nekudas? These are two Nekudas that the Baal Shem Tov heard from his father on his deathbed. Achdas Hashem, what we call in our culture, Ein Eid Mulvadei. Achdas Hashem, besides for the Eibishter, there's nothing. Ein Eid Mulvadei. In the words of the Baal Shem Tov's father, fear nothing except for Hashem himself, right? Everybody knows that Lashon, right? Don't be afraid of anything except for the Eibishter himself. Achdas Hashem, Ein Eid Mulvadei. And the second principle is the principle of Avos Yisrael. I just want to say one more point, and then I'm going to stop. And the one point that I want to add is that there's a very, very big difference in Chassidus Kabbalah in terms of what's the kavanah. In Kabbalah, the purpose of creation is to make this world into Atzilus. In other words, Kabbalah would say the purpose of the creation is to make this world, to make it into Elokus. While in Chassidus, in other words, the most important world in Kabbalah is Atzilus. The end of creation is that everything becomes in a matzav of Atzilus. And in Chassidus, we had the idea of Nesav HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisayis Baruch Dira B'Tachtenim. That the most important world is not Lamaila. The most important world is not this world. and Torah mitzvah that we practice down here, v'chuli, v'chuli, v'chuli. Now what I'm going to do, Mitzvah Shem, next week, and perhaps in the weeks following, is now that we reached the point of the Baal Shem Tov's Galus, I want to talk to you about Torah Chasidus. In other words, we're going to divide up Torah Chasidus into a number of parts. Torah, Tefillah, Tzedakah, Yidden, and the world. And for each one, I'll tell you a few stories in his art. So we, so to speak, a little bit, not a lot, but a little bit, to develop Chasidus Mahu in the world of the Baal Shem Tov. That's what the mitzvah